Have you ever felt like you were doing your best for your family, yet deep inside something still felt wrong, and you were so tired you almost wanted to give up? In this video, I share my real journey of settling and working in the United States, where I once believed I was simply helping my wife, until I truly understood what parenting equality means, and how learning to share responsibility transformed my marriage and my life. Are you helping or sharing? You can work 12 hours a day, pay every bill on time, carry groceries into the house, and still feel like something is quietly falling apart inside your family. That was me during my first years living and working in the United States. On the outside, I looked responsible. On the inside, I was confused, tired, and slowly frustrated. I believed I was doing everything right. I believed I was helping my wife. I believed that was enough. But the truth hiding behind one small English word, help, was about to change my entire understanding of parenting equality in America. When I first settled in the U.S., my focus was survival and stability. New country. New job. New system. Different climate. Different culture. My energy went into adapting, improving my English, and proving that I could succeed. At home, I followed the model I grew up seeing. The husband works hard. The wife manages most of the home and children. If the husband washes dishes or watches the kids, people say he is kind. They say he is supportive. They say he helps. So I proudly told myself, I help my wife. In simple, slow English, that sentence sounded positive. It felt responsible. But American family culture, especially in modern households, quietly operates on a different framework. Here, parenting equality is not a bonus feature. It is an expectation. It means shared ownership of daily life. Shared mental load. Shared decision-making. Shared exhaustion. The turning point did not happen during a big argument. It happened on an ordinary weekday evening. My wife had just finished cleaning up after dinner. I had played with our child for 20 minutes and felt satisfied with myself. I said, "Let me know how I can help." She looked at me calmly and replied, "I don't need help. I need a partner." That sentence stayed in my mind longer than any English vocabulary list I had memorized. From a psychological perspective, language shapes identity. When you say I help, you unconsciously position the task as belonging to someone else. The responsibility is primary for them and optional for you. Research in marital satisfaction consistently shows that perceived fairness in household and parenting responsibilities strongly predicts long-term relationship stability. It is not only about who does more tasks. It is about whether both partners feel equal ownership. In the United States, especially in dual-income families, both parents often work full-time. Both parents attend school meetings. Both parents cook, clean, schedule appointments, and wake up at night with a sick child. The word help implies temporary assistance. The phrase share responsibility implies commitment. As I continued practicing English through daily conversation, I began noticing subtle differences in how American fathers spoke. They would say, "We're taking the kids to the doctor." Not, "She's taking them." They would say, "I'm on dinner duty tonight." Not, "I'm helping with dinner." The grammar was simple. The mindset was different. Neuroscience tells us that emotional experiences strengthen memory retention. That is why learning English through real-life stories is powerful. When I connected the phrase parenting equality to my own marriage struggles, it stopped being abstract vocabulary. It became personal transformation. Each time I repeated slowly, "We share responsibility," I was training not only my pronunciation but also my perspective. There is also something deeper happening in the brain. Studies on cognitive load show that when one partner carries the invisible planning, remembering birthdays, scheduling pediatric visits, organizing school events, that invisible weight creates chronic stress. Even if tasks look divided on paper, the mental load may not be equal. True parenting equality means sharing both visible work and invisible thinking. I started experimenting with small changes. Instead of waiting to be asked, I proactively took ownership. I handled school forms without reminders. I prepared meals without announcing it. I learned our child's schedule as carefully as I learned new English vocabulary. At first, it felt mechanical, like practicing a new language pattern. Over time, it became natural. Something surprising happened. My stress decreased. Our conversations became softer. Arguments became shorter. According to relationship research from American Family Studies, couples who perceive equitable division of labor report higher emotional intimacy and lower conflict frequency. Fairness reduces resentment. Resentment reduces emotional distance. Looking back, I realize my early misunderstanding was not about culture alone. It was about ego. Saying I help allowed me to feel generous. Saying we share responsibility required humility. It meant admitting that parenting and home life were not secondary to my career. They were equal priorities. For those of you learning English in 2026 and watching this Real English Story Practice, understand this: vocabulary is not only about pronunciation. It is about worldview. The difference between help and share is small in spelling, but enormous in meaning. When you practice slow listening and clear speaking through real-life stories, your brain connects language with identity. That connection lasts. If you are feeling discouraged, maybe tired from work, tired from marriage tension, tired from struggling with English, pause for a moment. The solution might not be working harder. It might be redefining one word. In America, parenting equality is not about competition. It is about partnership. It is not about counting who changed more diapers. It is about standing on the same side of the problem. I once thought success in the United States meant career advancement and financial security. Now I understand that success also means coming home and knowing we both carry the weight together. The question that transformed my life is simple: am I helping or am I sharing? That question opened the door to growth, not only as a husband and father, but as a man learning to live fully in a new country. And sometimes, the most powerful English lesson you will ever learn is just 3 calm, steady words: we share responsibility. The pressure of starting over in America. The first winter I experienced in the United States felt like a test I had never studied for. The air was colder than I expected, the sky darker, the streets quieter. Everything looked organized and efficient, yet inside I felt disorganized and uncertain. Starting over in America was not only about immigration paperwork or finding a job. It was about rebuilding identity. And while I was learning how to survive professionally, I did not realize how much pressure was silently building inside my marriage. Settling in a new country changes the rhythm of daily life. Back home, I understood the system. I understood humor, body language, and unspoken rules. In the US, even small tasks required mental energy. Opening a bank account. Understanding health insurance. Speaking clearly at work meetings. Every sentence in English required focus. Every conversation felt like an exam. By the end of each workday, my brain felt overloaded. Cognitive science explains this clearly. When you operate in a second language, your brain consumes more working memory. You process vocabulary, grammar, tone, and meaning at the same time. That extra cognitive load increases fatigue. So when I came home from work, I told myself I was exhausted because of my job. But part of that exhaustion came from constant translation inside my head. Meanwhile, my wife was adapting too. She was navigating her own responsibilities, managing our child, organizing our home, and adjusting to American culture. The difference was subtle but powerful. While I focused on external survival, career, income, English improvement, she carried much of the internal survival, routine, stability, emotional balance at home. At that time, I believed pressure justified my limited involvement at home. I would say, work is stressful. And it was true. But stress does not cancel responsibility. It only tests how we distribute it. Living in the United States also introduced me to a different cultural expectation about family roles. In many American households, especially in cities where both partners work, shared responsibility is standard. Fathers drop children at daycare before work. Mothers lead business meetings. Parents rotate cooking nights. No one calls it extraordinary. It is normal. At first, I admired this system from a distance. I saw coworkers leaving early to attend school events. I heard male colleagues openly discussing bedtime routines and pediatric appointments. I noticed something interesting in their language. They did not say, "I babysit my kids tonight." They said, "I'm with the kids tonight." The words carried equality. Language reveals values. At home, however, my behavior still followed old habits. I thought long work hours proved commitment. I assumed providing financially was my main duty. When I occasionally vacuumed or cooked, I felt generous. I did not yet see the imbalance forming. Psychologists describe this stage as role transition stress. When individuals move to a new cultural environment, they often cling to familiar identity patterns because everything else feels unstable. For me, holding on to the role of primary provider gave me psychological security. It felt predictable. But America was quietly teaching me a broader definition of partnership. There were nights when my wife looked more tired than I felt, even though I had worked all day. She managed schedules, meals, homework, laundry, and emotional needs. Research in family studies calls this the mental load, the invisible planning and anticipation required to run a household. It is not measured in hours alone. It is measured in constant awareness. I began noticing how often she anticipated problems before they happened. She packed school bags in advance. She scheduled doctor visits without reminders. She remembered deadlines. I realized that while I was mentally recovering from English conversations at work, she was mentally juggling family logistics. The irony is that I was improving my English every day, listening to podcasts, practicing pronunciation, learning professional vocabulary, but I was not yet fluent in the language of shared responsibility. There is also something important about immigrant ambition. Many of us arrive in the United States determined to succeed. We work harder than ever. We accept overtime. We push ourselves. Ambition is admirable. But without balance, ambition can quietly isolate you from your own family. One evening, after a particularly long week, I sat at the kitchen table reviewing work emails. My wife was helping our child with homework while preparing dinner. I suddenly saw the scene differently. We were both working. Only the location was different. That realization felt uncomfortable. It challenged the story I had been telling myself, that my stress was heavier, that my effort was greater. Objectively, both of us were under pressure. The difference was visibility. American culture emphasizes partnership in both public and private life. Equal participation is linked to long-term relationship satisfaction. Studies from U.S. marital research indicate that couples who adapt to shared roles during major transitions, like relocation or career changes, are more resilient over time. Starting over in America tested more than my language skills. It tested my flexibility. It tested my ego. It tested my ability to redefine strength. True strength, I began to understand, is not measured only by income or endurance at work. It is measured by willingness to adapt at home. It is measured by recognizing that your partner is also navigating cultural stress, language challenges, and emotional fatigue. As I continued building my career in the United States, I slowly accepted that professional growth without relational growth creates imbalance. The American dream is not only about financial stability. It is also about building a life where both partners stand equally. The pressure of starting over in America did not break my marriage. But it exposed its weak points. It forced me to confront the gap between helping and sharing. And it prepared me for the deeper lesson that parenting equality would soon demand. Because adapting to a new country is hard. Adapting your mindset is harder. And sometimes, the most important immigration process is not paperwork, it is transforming the role you play inside your own home. Love between two cultures. Love looks simple in movies. Two people meet, smile, talk, and everything flows naturally. Real life, especially real life in the United States as an immigrant, is quieter, more complicated, and sometimes beautifully awkward. My love story in America did not begin with perfect English or cultural confidence. It began with slow sentences, misunderstandings, and the strange space between two different worlds trying to build one shared future. When I first started dating my wife in the U.S., I was still adjusting to American communication style. In many American relationships, emotional expression is direct. People say what they feel. They discuss expectations early. They ask clear questions. For me, this was new. I came from a background where emotions were often implied rather than spoken. Our early conversations were simple. I spoke slowly. I chose my words carefully. Sometimes I paused mid-sentence, searching for the right vocabulary. Instead of saying long, complicated thoughts, I used clear, short phrases. I appreciate you. I feel tired today. I want us to understand each other. Those sentences may sound basic, but they built something strong. In language learning research, simplicity improves clarity. In relationships, clarity builds trust. The slower I spoke, the more intentional I became. And intention created intimacy. Cultural differences appeared quickly. In American dating culture, shared decision-making starts early. We discussed finances, career goals, even future parenting ideas before marriage. At first, those conversations made me uncomfortable. I thought some topics should wait. But in the United States, transparency is often considered respect. I remember one evening sitting in a small cafe, talking about our future. She said, "If we have children, I expect both of us to be equally involved." At that time, I nodded confidently. Of course, I agreed. In theory, equality sounded fair and modern. But I had not yet examined what equality would require in daily life. Love across cultures demands humility. You cannot assume your model is automatically correct. Sociologists describe cross-cultural relationships as negotiation spaces. Each partner carries invisible assumptions shaped by upbringing, media, and social norms. Without open dialogue, those assumptions collide. Our first small conflict revealed this clearly. It was about something ordinary, chores. I believed appreciation was enough. If she cleaned the kitchen, I thanked her warmly. I thought gratitude equaled contribution. She believed participation was more important than praise. That moment taught me something essential about American relationship values. Appreciation matters. But shared action matters more. In the U.S., especially among younger families, equality is often demonstrated through behavior, not just words. Research from American family studies indicates that couples who divide household tasks more evenly report higher levels of emotional satisfaction and lower levels of resentment. These findings are not abstract. They reflect daily patterns. As our relationship deepened and we moved toward marriage, cultural contrasts became opportunities rather than obstacles. We created small habits that strengthened communication. Every Sunday evening, we talked about the upcoming week. Who would handle groceries? Who would attend appointments? Who would cook? These conversations were practical, but they also built teamwork. For me, these weekly discussions doubled as English practice. I learned vocabulary connected to real life: schedule, responsibility, deadline, childcare, partnership. Because the words were tied to emotion and action, I remembered them easily. Emotional relevance enhances memory consolidation. Neuroscience supports this. When language is linked to meaningful experiences, retention improves. Marriage in America also exposed me to a different model of romantic partnership. Instead of fixed roles, flexibility was valued. If one partner had an intense workweek, the other adjusted. When one felt overwhelmed, the other stepped forward. Equality was dynamic, not rigid. At times, I felt defensive. I worked long hours. I was building a career in a new country. Part of me wanted recognition for that effort. But I slowly understood that love is not a competition of sacrifices. It is a collaboration of strengths. Our love story matured not through grand gestures but through ordinary evenings. Cooking together. Reviewing bills together. Talking through disagreements instead of avoiding them. In American relationship culture, avoidance is often seen as distance. Direct conversation is seen as care. I began to notice how language influenced emotional tone. When I said, "I'll try to help," the energy felt temporary. When I said, "This is our responsibility," the energy felt stable. Words create structure. Cross-cultural love requires translation beyond vocabulary. You translate expectations. You translate emotional habits. You translate silence into clarity. There were moments of tension. Moments when our different backgrounds felt heavy. But each conversation strengthened mutual respect. Studies on intercultural marriage show that couples who actively discuss cultural differences early are more resilient long-term. Communication is not optional. It is foundational. Looking back, our relationship became my most powerful English classroom. Not because we discussed grammar rules, but because we practiced honest expression. Slow speaking. Clear listening. Real emotion. Love between two cultures is not about erasing differences. It is about building a third culture inside your home, one that combines the best of both. And in that shared space, I began to see that parenting equality would not be a sudden decision. It would be the natural continuation of a love built on communication, humility, and shared growth. Because when love is intentional, equality is not forced. It becomes the language you both choose to speak. When I thought I was helping. Confidence can be dangerous when it hides blind spots. After getting married and settling more comfortably into life in the United States, I genuinely believed I had figured things out. I was working full-time, improving my English, paying bills on schedule, and occasionally cooking dinner or cleaning the living room. In my mind, I was a supportive husband. I told myself, with quiet pride, I help my wife. That sentence sounded responsible. It sounded modern. It sounded fair. But it was incomplete. In American culture, especially in households shaped by parenting equality, the difference between helping and sharing is not semantic. It is structural. At that time, I did not understand the structure. I believed intention mattered more than distribution. Our daily routine seemed smooth on the surface. I left early for work. She organized the morning schedule. I returned home tired from meetings conducted entirely in English, my brain still translating complex discussions. She had spent the day managing our child, appointments, meals, and dozens of invisible decisions. When I arrived home, I might wash dishes or read a bedtime story. Then I would think, I contributed. I helped. The first crack in that belief appeared during a quiet conversation about fatigue. She was not accusing. She was explaining. She described feeling mentally overloaded. I responded logically. Tell me what you need. I'll help more. Her reply was simple. I don't want to manage the tasks and manage you. That sentence forced me to confront something uncomfortable. Even when I offered help, she still carried the responsibility of planning, delegating, and remembering. Psychologists refer to this as the cognitive labor or mental load of a household. It includes anticipating needs, tracking deadlines, organizing routines, and preventing problems before they happen. Research from American family studies consistently shows that uneven distribution of cognitive labor leads to long-term dissatisfaction, even when physical chores appear balanced. My mistake was subtle. I believed that willingness equaled equality. I believed that if I said yes when asked, I was doing my part. But equality does not function on request-based contribution. It functions on shared ownership. Language once again exposed the gap. When I said, "Let me know how I can help," I positioned myself as secondary support. The primary responsibility remained hers. In contrast, when I began saying, "I'll handle the school forms this week," or "I'm scheduling the pediatric appointment," I was stepping into ownership. In the United States, modern parenting culture emphasizes proactive engagement. Fathers are expected to know the names of teachers, the details of medical history, and the rhythm of their children's schedules. Not as assistants. As equal participants. At first, this shift challenged my identity. I had been raised to equate financial provision with leadership. Working hard outside the home felt like fulfilling my duty. But American family dynamics introduced a broader definition of leadership: emotional presence, logistical coordination, and consistent participation. There is also a neurological dimension to this transition. When one partner constantly anticipates and organizes, their stress levels remain elevated. Chronic cognitive load activates stress responses that affect mood and patience. When tasks are shared more evenly, stress decreases and relationship quality improves. Scientific studies on equitable division of labor link fairness perception to lower cortisol levels and higher relationship satisfaction. I began observing patterns more closely. Who packed school lunches without reminders? Who remembered vaccination schedules? Who noticed when groceries were running low? The answers were not evenly distributed. The realization was uncomfortable because it required humility. It required admitting that good intentions were not enough. It required redefining masculinity within the context of American parenting equality. At work, I valued initiative. I admired colleagues who anticipated problems and solved them independently. At home, however, I had unconsciously adopted a reactive role. I waited for direction. That contradiction became impossible to ignore. The turning point came when I intentionally stopped waiting. Instead of asking what needed to be done, I observed and acted. I reviewed our child's school calendar. I created reminders on my phone. I took full responsibility for certain weekly tasks without negotiation. No announcements. No expectation of praise. The shift felt small at first, almost invisible. But emotionally, the atmosphere changed. Conversations became lighter. My wife's tone softened. The home felt more balanced. Parenting equality in America is not about perfection. It is about participation. It is not about counting minutes spent on chores. It is about equal mental investment. For viewers practicing real English listening through this story, notice the vocabulary difference. Help implies optional assistance. Share responsibility implies commitment. These words may appear similar in casual conversation, but in family systems, they create entirely different emotional structures. Immigrant adaptation often focuses on professional success, accent reduction, and financial stability. Yet family adaptation is equally critical. If you build external success without internal partnership, imbalance grows quietly. Looking back, I understand that my earlier belief, "I am helping," protected my ego. It allowed me to feel generous without fully transforming my behavior. True growth required letting go of that comfort. When I replaced "I help" with "we share," my marriage did not become perfect overnight. But it became more honest. And honesty builds stability. The lesson was simple but transformative. In the United States, parenting equality is not a favor you offer. It is a responsibility you claim. And claiming it changed everything. The shock of parenting equality. The moment I truly understood parenting equality in America did not arrive with celebration. It arrived with discomfort. Not loud conflict. Not dramatic ultimatums. Just a quiet realization that my definition of being a good father was incomplete. By that time, we had settled more deeply into life in the United States. I was stable at work. My English had improved. I could handle meetings without rehearsing every sentence in my head. From the outside, everything looked successful. Inside our home, however, subtle tensions still existed. Not constant arguments, just an imbalance that neither of us could ignore anymore. The shock came during a parent-teacher conference at our child's school. We both attended. The teacher asked detailed questions about routines, homework habits, emotional changes, and developmental milestones. My wife answered most of them quickly and confidently. I paused more often. Some details, I simply did not know. Driving home, I felt uneasy. I was present physically, but not fully informed. That difference bothered me more than I expected. Parenting equality in the United States is built on the assumption that both parents are informed decision-makers. Schools communicate with both. Healthcare providers expect both to understand medical history. Forms list 2 responsible adults, not one primary and one assistant. The system itself reflects shared responsibility. Sociological research in the U.S. shows that fathers who are actively involved in daily childcare, not just weekend activities, contribute to stronger cognitive and emotional outcomes in children. The benefit is not symbolic. It is measurable. Children show improved language development, better emotional regulation, and higher academic engagement when both parents participate consistently. That research forced me to look honestly at my own participation. Was I truly sharing responsibility, or was I still operating under a support role mindset? Another revealing moment came during a routine pediatric appointment. The doctor asked about sleep patterns, diet changes, and recent behavioral shifts. Again, my wife answered most questions effortlessly. I listened, nodding, realizing I had not internalized those details. I was involved, but not integrated. Integration is different from presence. In American family culture, especially among younger generations, fathers are expected to know these details without being briefed. Parenting equality is not performance, it is preparation. It requires mental engagement before problems arise. Psychologists often describe this as anticipatory responsibility, the ability to foresee needs and act proactively. When only one partner carries anticipatory responsibility, imbalance forms. When both carry it, partnership strengthens. I began noticing how often I relied on updates instead of ownership. I would ask, "What's going on this week?" instead of already knowing. I would say, "Remind me about the appointment," instead of setting reminders myself. These habits seemed small, but they reflected dependency. The emotional impact of that realization was humbling. I had convinced myself that long work hours justified partial disengagement at home. But equality does not operate on justification. It operates on fairness. In the U.S., many families function with dual careers. Economic reality requires both adults to contribute financially. Cultural evolution requires both adults to contribute domestically. Parenting equality is not anti-tradition. It is adaptive. Neuroscience supports the importance of shared parenting. Studies show that when fathers engage regularly in caregiving routines, neural bonding pathways strengthen. Oxytocin levels increase, deepening emotional attachment between parent and child. In other words, involvement does not just benefit the child, it transforms the parent. That insight changed my motivation. Equality was no longer just about reducing tension in marriage. It was about strengthening connection with my child. The real shock was understanding that helping occasionally is not the same as building daily competence. If I truly believed in partnership, I needed to master the details. Bedtime routines. Meal preferences. School deadlines. Emotional signals. I started small. I took full responsibility for morning preparation twice a week. Not assisting, leading. I scheduled appointments directly. I communicated with teachers personally. At first, it felt awkward, like speaking English in my early days in America, slow, uncertain, self-conscious. But repetition built fluency. That comparison surprised me. Learning parenting equality felt similar to learning a second language. At first, you translate. Then you internalize. Eventually, it becomes natural. For viewers practicing English through this real-life story, pay attention to this phrase, share responsibility. Repeat it slowly. Notice how it feels different from help. Language shapes thought. Thought shapes behavior. The biggest internal shift came when I stopped measuring contribution by effort and started measuring it by ownership. Effort can be temporary. Ownership is consistent. Parenting equality in America challenged my identity, but it also expanded it. I did not lose authority. I gained connection. I did not lose respect. I gained partnership. The shock was not that equality existed. The shock was realizing how much I had misunderstood it. I once believed success in the United States meant professional recognition. Now I see that real success includes showing up fully at home, with knowledge, initiative, and accountability. Equality is not about dividing tasks perfectly. It is about eliminating hierarchy in responsibility. And once I accepted that, I stopped asking whether I was helping enough. I started asking whether I was sharing completely. Arguments behind closed doors. No one posts pictures of quiet arguments. Social media shows smiling family photos, birthday parties, and weekend trips. What it does not show are the low-volume conversations that happen after the kids are asleep, when two adults sit at the kitchen table and realize something feels uneven. Our home in the United States looked stable from the outside. We both worked hard. We loved our child deeply. We were committed to our marriage. Yet small disagreements kept repeating. Not explosive fights, more like recurring friction. Dishes left in the sink. Missed details about school emails. Assumptions about who would handle what. At first, I labeled these moments as stress. Immigration stress. Work stress. Parenting stress. All true. But stress alone was not the full explanation. One evening, after a long week, we had a conversation that stayed with me. My wife said, calmly but firmly, "I feel like the project manager of this family." That sentence was not emotional drama. It was data. She felt responsible for overseeing everything, even when I completed tasks. That distinction was critical. In many modern American households, equality is not measured only by task completion. It is measured by mental leadership. Who tracks deadlines? Who anticipates conflicts? Who makes sure nothing falls through the cracks? Research in U.S. family psychology calls this the invisible labor gap. Even in couples where men report high participation in chores, women often carry more planning responsibility. When I heard the phrase project manager, something clicked. At work, I understood exactly what that meant. A project manager does not necessarily do every task. They coordinate, monitor, anticipate, and solve. If my wife felt like the sole manager, then equality was still incomplete. Our arguments often followed a predictable pattern. She would express exhaustion. I would defend my effort. She would clarify that effort was not the issue, imbalance was. I would feel misunderstood. The cycle repeated. Communication researchers explain this pattern as defensive listening. When we feel accused, even indirectly, our brains shift into protection mode. We focus on defending our intentions rather than understanding the concern. That was my default reaction. I heard criticism instead of information. But American relationship culture values direct communication. Avoiding difficult conversations often increases long-term dissatisfaction. Couples who engage in structured dialogue, even uncomfortable dialogue, report stronger relational stability over time. So we changed our approach. Instead of reacting emotionally, we began setting aside intentional discussion time once a week. No distractions. No phones. Just review and reset. We talked about logistics first. Who handles medical appointments this month? Who tracks extracurricular schedules? Who manages grocery planning? Clear assignments reduced ambiguity. Then we talked about emotional load. Who feels overwhelmed? Why? What adjustments are needed? This structure mirrored professional teamwork. Clear roles. Clear accountability. Shared goals. For me, these conversations also became English practice. Discussing responsibility, fairness, workload, and partnership required vocabulary beyond casual conversation. Words like balance, ownership, anticipation, coordination, and emotional capacity entered my daily speech. Because the topics mattered deeply, I retained the vocabulary naturally. The deeper issue beneath our arguments was identity transition. I was still shifting from the provider-focused model I grew up with to the partnership-focused model common in the United States. That transition required dismantling assumptions I had never questioned. There were moments when my ego resisted. I worked hard. I sacrificed comfort to build a career in a new country. Part of me wanted recognition for that struggle. But equality does not diminish sacrifice. It redistributes responsibility. Psychological research supports this evolution. Studies show that couples who perceive fairness in division of labor report greater intimacy and lower stress levels. Fairness is subjective, but perception matters. If one partner consistently feels overloaded, emotional distance grows. As our discussions continued, something subtle changed. Our arguments became shorter. Less defensive. More solution-oriented. Instead of debating whether I helped enough, we focused on systems. Systems reduce conflict. For example, we created shared digital calendars. We divided recurring tasks permanently instead of negotiating weekly. I became the default contact for certain responsibilities, school communications, and medical scheduling. She managed others. No constant checking required. This shift reduced emotional friction significantly. When expectations are clear, disappointment decreases. Parenting equality in America is not automatic. It requires design. It requires intention. It requires uncomfortable honesty. Behind closed doors, we were not fighting about dishes. We were negotiating identity, fairness, and partnership. And something else happened during those months. I began noticing a difference in my relationship with my child. As I took fuller ownership of routines, our bond deepened. Familiarity replaced uncertainty. Confidence replaced hesitation. The arguments had not been signs of failure. They were signals of growth. For anyone adapting to life in the United States while building a family, understand this: cultural transition amplifies hidden assumptions. Immigration tests resilience. Parenting tests flexibility. Marriage tests humility. Those quiet kitchen table conversations became turning points. Not because they were dramatic, but because they were honest. Equality is rarely established through one big decision. It is built through many small corrections. And behind every stable family photo, there are conversations that made stability possible. English changed me from the inside. Improving my English was supposed to help my career. That was the original goal. Clear communication at work. Better presentations. More confidence in meetings. What I did not expect was that learning English slowly and intentionally would begin reshaping my marriage from the inside. In the early years of living in the United States, I treated English like a technical skill. Grammar rules. Vocabulary lists. Pronunciation drills. I practiced during commutes. I repeated phrases under my breath. I watched interviews and paused to imitate intonation. All of it helped professionally. But something deeper started happening when I began applying English directly to real conversations at home. Parenting equality forced us to talk about responsibility in precise terms. Vague language created confusion. Specific language created clarity. Instead of saying, "I'll try to help more," I learned to say, "I will take full responsibility for morning school preparation on Mondays and Wednesdays." That sentence required more vocabulary, but it also eliminated ambiguity. Communication researchers in the United States emphasize that clarity reduces relational anxiety. When expectations are unclear, both partners operate in uncertainty. Uncertainty increases stress. Clear commitments decrease it. As I practiced slow, deliberate English, I noticed something surprising. Speaking slowly reduced emotional escalation. When I searched carefully for words, I paused before reacting. Those pauses prevented defensive responses. My brain had time to regulate. Neuroscience explains this effect. When we slow down speech, we engage more cognitive control systems in the prefrontal cortex. That area helps regulate emotional impulses from the amygdala. In simple terms, slow speaking encourages thoughtful responding instead of automatic reacting. Before improving my English, arguments sometimes escalated because I responded emotionally. After committing to clearer expression, my sentences became more intentional. I feel overwhelmed. I need clarity about this responsibility. I want us to share this equally. These are simple sentences. But emotionally, they are powerful. There is also something transformative about vocabulary itself. Words shape identity. When I replaced help with share responsibility, I was not just changing phrasing. I was reshaping how I saw my role as a husband and father. In American family culture, especially in conversations about parenting equality, terminology matters. Co-parenting. Shared labor. Mental load. These phrases carry social meaning. Learning them expanded my understanding of what equality truly required. Practicing real-life English conversations also improved listening skills. I began focusing less on preparing my response and more on understanding her perspective. Active listening is a skill emphasized in American relationship counseling. It involves reflecting back what you hear before defending yourself. So instead of reacting immediately, I would say, "What I hear you saying is that you feel alone in planning. Is that correct?" That sentence alone reduced tension dramatically. It signaled attention rather than opposition. Studies in marital psychology consistently show that couples who practice reflective listening experience fewer destructive conflicts. Feeling heard reduces defensiveness. Reduced defensiveness increases cooperation. For viewers using this story as real English listening practice, notice the structure of these sentences. They are not complex. They are clear. Clarity is more important than sophistication. Another change occurred internally. As my English improved, my confidence increased, not only at work but at home. Earlier, when discussions became emotionally intense, I sometimes struggled to articulate complex feelings. That limitation created frustration. With stronger vocabulary, I could describe nuance. I'm not avoiding responsibility. I'm adjusting to a new system. I feel pressure from work, but I don't want that pressure to excuse imbalance. Articulating these thoughts prevented misunderstandings. In immigrant life, language barriers can unintentionally create emotional barriers. When you cannot fully express yourself, your partner may misinterpret silence as indifference. Strengthening language reduces that risk. There is also evidence from bilingual psychology that learning and using a second language can increase cognitive flexibility. Cognitive flexibility improves problem-solving and perspective-taking. As my English fluency increased, I noticed greater openness to alternative viewpoints, including my wife's expectations about parenting equality. Instead of seeing her perspective as criticism, I began viewing it as collaboration. We also established a practice of using calm, structured dialogue during disagreements. We avoided generalizations like always and never. We focused on specific behaviors. That shift aligned with communication strategies recommended in American couples therapy. For example, instead of saying, "You never help," she would say, "This week I handled 3 appointments alone." Instead of replying defensively, I would respond, "Let's divide the next 3 together." Language created structure. Structure created fairness. The transformation was gradual, not dramatic. There was no single breakthrough moment. But over months, our conversations became more balanced. Our expectations became clearer. Our partnership became more stable. English did more than help me integrate professionally into American society. It helped me integrate emotionally into my own family. Parenting equality is not sustained by good intentions alone. It requires precise communication. It requires vocabulary for accountability. It requires listening with patience. In many ways, learning English trained me to think more deliberately. And deliberate thinking strengthened deliberate partnership. The irony is that I began studying English to build external success. What it built internally was far more valuable. Because sometimes, fluency is not measured by accent or grammar. It is measured by how clearly you can say, "We share this life equally." The science behind equal marriage. Parenting equality sounds like a modern slogan, something you might see in an article about family life in the United States. But behind that phrase, there is serious research. What surprised me most during my journey was discovering that what my wife was asking for was not just emotional preference. It was scientifically supported. When I began reading more about marriage dynamics in America, I found repeated patterns in research from family psychology and sociology. Couples who perceive fairness in household and parenting responsibilities report higher long-term satisfaction. Not slightly higher, significantly higher. Fairness is strongly correlated with emotional intimacy, lower conflict frequency, and even improved physical health outcomes. At first, I resisted the idea that division of chores could influence something as deep as love. Love felt emotional. Chores felt practical. But in reality, daily practical patterns shape emotional climate. One major concept that researchers highlight is perceived equity. It is not about perfect mathematical equality. It is about whether both partners feel the system is fair. When one partner consistently carries more cognitive or physical labor, even if unintentionally, resentment builds quietly. Resentment is rarely loud in the beginning. It accumulates in small, repeated experiences. Forgotten appointments. Unacknowledged planning. Uneven rest. Over time, those micro-imbalances influence tone, patience, and emotional safety. Neuroscience provides another layer of explanation. Chronic stress from carrying disproportionate responsibility activates the body's stress response system. Elevated cortisol levels affect mood regulation and sleep quality. When one partner remains in a prolonged state of cognitive overload, emotional distance can develop, not because of lack of love, but because of fatigue. Understanding this shifted my perspective. Parenting equality was not about winning an argument. It was about protecting our long-term stability. American marriage research also highlights the importance of shared decision-making. Couples who consult each other regularly about finances, schedules, and child development demonstrate higher trust levels. Shared authority reinforces partnership. Before fully embracing equality, I often made professional decisions independently while assuming domestic routines would simply adapt. That approach worked temporarily, but it created imbalance. Once we began discussing major choices collaboratively, tension decreased. There is also compelling data about father involvement. Studies conducted in the United States show that children with actively engaged fathers demonstrate improved academic performance and stronger emotional resilience. Active engagement includes routine caregiving, not just recreational activities. I used to associate fatherhood primarily with guidance and discipline. The research expanded that definition. Emotional availability and logistical participation are equally important. One concept that particularly influenced me was mental load distribution. Researchers describe mental load as the ongoing process of remembering, planning, and anticipating household needs. It is invisible but powerful. When both partners share mental load, relationship satisfaction improves because responsibility feels mutual. In our home, implementing this required systems. We adopted shared digital calendars. We assigned primary ownership of recurring tasks. We conducted weekly check-ins. These practices may sound formal, but they reduced ambiguity. Clarity reduces conflict. American relationship counseling often emphasizes proactive communication. Waiting until frustration peaks increases defensiveness. Regular structured dialogue prevents escalation. That approach aligned with what we had begun practicing naturally. From a psychological standpoint, equality also strengthens identity within marriage. When both partners perceive themselves as capable contributors, mutual respect grows. Respect reduces power imbalance. Reduced power imbalance increases trust. Trust is foundational. Without it, even small disagreements feel threatening. Another scientific insight relates to modeling behavior for children. Children internalize relational patterns they observe. When they witness shared responsibility, they develop broader expectations about gender roles and cooperation. Parenting equality shapes not only present dynamics but future beliefs. That realization deeply affected me as a father living in the United States. I wanted my child to grow up understanding partnership as normal, not exceptional. Interestingly, as we improved equality at home, my professional performance also improved. Reduced domestic tension increased cognitive focus at work. Emotional stability supports executive function. The brain performs better when relational stress decreases. This interconnectedness surprised me. Work and family are not separate compartments. They influence each other continuously. For viewers practicing English listening through this real-life story, pay attention to how research vocabulary appears in daily life. Words like equity, cognitive load, emotional regulation, and mutual respect are not abstract. They describe practical experiences. Parenting equality in America is supported not only by cultural evolution but by measurable psychological outcomes. It is associated with stronger marriages, healthier children, and more stable households. Learning this transformed my motivation. I was no longer adjusting behavior simply to avoid conflict. I was building a system supported by evidence. There is something empowering about understanding the science behind personal growth. It removes ego from the equation. It replaces defensiveness with curiosity. Equality stopped feeling like a demand and started feeling like a strategy. And once I saw that fairness is not weakness but strength, I embraced it fully. Because a balanced partnership is not just emotionally satisfying. It is scientifically sustainable. When helping wasn't enough anymore. There was a night when the word help almost broke our marriage. Not because my husband refused to help. Not because he didn't love our child. But because I suddenly realized that the word itself was wrong. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. By this point in our journey of parenting equality in America, we had survived culture shock, financial pressure, long work hours, and the silent loneliness that comes with being immigrants. I was working full-time, trying to grow professionally in the United States, while also carrying the invisible mental load of motherhood, doctor appointments, school emails, grocery lists, birthday planning, emotional check-ins. He would say, "Just tell me what you need. I'll help." And for years, I thought that was enough. That night, I was exhausted. Not physically tired, soul tired. The kind of tired that comes from constantly thinking for everyone. I had just finished cleaning the kitchen at midnight after putting our child to bed, replying to work emails, and preparing documents for the next day. He walked in and said, kindly, "Why didn't you ask me to help?" Something inside me cracked. Because the problem wasn't help. The problem was responsibility. This is where my understanding of parenting equality in America began to shift in a deeper way. In many American families I had observed, through coworkers, neighbors, and school communities, the conversation wasn't about helping mom. It was about shared responsibility. Equal ownership. Equal mental load. In our home, without realizing it, we had recreated a pattern from our upbringing. I was the manager. He was the assistant. And that dynamic, even if unintentional, slowly created resentment. Marriage challenges don't always explode dramatically. Sometimes they grow quietly through small misunderstandings repeated daily. We weren't fighting about love. We were fighting about fairness. So I asked him a question that changed everything. If I disappear for 1 week, would you know everything that needs to be done without asking me? He went silent. That silence was not defensive. It was honest. And that honesty opened the door to transformation. We began having uncomfortable but necessary conversations about what real partnership means. Not emotional speeches. Practical conversations. Who tracks the school calendar? Who schedules dentist appointments? Who notices when shoes no longer fit? Who remembers to buy birthday gifts for classmates? Who anticipates emotional needs before they explode? In America, the idea of modern parenting partnership is often discussed openly, on podcasts, in workplaces, even in casual conversations. But living it is harder than talking about it. We decided to experiment. Instead of dividing tasks randomly, we divided ownership. If he took school communication, it was fully his domain. No reminders from me. If I handled finances, it was fully mine. No micromanaging from him. The first few weeks were messy. He forgot a field trip form. I over-controlled the grocery budget. We both made mistakes. But something powerful happened. Accountability replaced blame. I stopped being the project manager of the family. He stopped being a helper. We became co-leaders. This shift changed not only our daily routine but also our emotional intimacy. Resentment slowly faded because effort became visible and self-initiated. I realized something profound about marriage growth in America as an immigrant. Equality is not automatic here. It's intentional. It's negotiated. It's practiced. Many couples struggle silently because they confuse kindness with equality. A husband can be kind and still unintentionally unequal. A wife can be strong and still overfunction. True partnership requires both people to step into discomfort. There was one Saturday that showed me how far we had come. I had a work deadline. Instead of asking what to do, he simply said, "I've got today." He packed lunch, handled soccer practice, cleaned the house, and even remembered to prepare clothes for Monday. Not as a favor. Not as a performance. As responsibility. And that day, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, rest without guilt. That rest healed parts of me I didn't realize were tired. Living and working in the United States has taught me many things about independence, ambition, and resilience. But parenting equality taught me something deeper: love must evolve. If you're an immigrant couple building a life in America, the pressure is doubled. You're adapting to a new culture while carrying old habits. You're chasing financial stability while raising children in a society that moves fast and expects involvement from both parents. The question becomes, are we building a modern life with traditional assumptions? For us, the answer was yes, until we chose differently. We stopped asking, "Can you help?" We started asking, "What is yours?" This small language shift reshaped our home. Of course, it wasn't perfect. There were setbacks. There were emotional days when old habits resurfaced. Growth in marriage is never linear. But every time we returned to shared responsibility, we felt stronger. Parenting equality in America is not about copying Western families. It's about understanding that partnership protects love. It protects respect. It protects mental health. And maybe the most surprising lesson of all? Equality didn't make us less romantic. It made us more connected. When both partners feel seen, supported, and equally responsible, admiration grows. Attraction grows. Gratitude grows. Marriage isn't about keeping score. It's about carrying weight together. If someone watching this is on the edge of burnout or quiet resentment, I want you to know something important. You are not dramatic for wanting fairness. You are not selfish for wanting rest. And you are not weak for needing partnership. The shift from help to share may feel small, but in a marriage, it changes everything. Our journey of parenting equality in America continues. It's not a finished story. It's a daily practice. But today, when someone asks me what the biggest lesson has been in our immigrant marriage life, I don't talk about money or visas or career growth. I talk about responsibility. Because when responsibility is shared, love feels lighter. And when love feels lighter, you stop surviving and start building something truly strong together. The day I almost gave up, and why I didn't. There was a morning when I sat in my parked car outside our apartment in America and seriously considered quitting, not my job, not my marriage, but the fight for equality in our home. I was tired of explaining. Tired of negotiating. Tired of being the one who noticed everything first. From the outside, we looked like a stable immigrant family building the American dream. 2 working parents. A child adjusting to school life in the United States. Bills paid on time. Smiles in public. Inside, though, something felt uneven again. After months of progress in shared responsibility, old habits began creeping back in. It wasn't dramatic. It was subtle. I started automatically checking homework before he did. I reminded him about appointments just in case. I prepped things early because it felt safer than risking something being forgotten. And without meaning to, I slowly stepped back into the role of manager. Parenting equality in America is not a one-time conversation. It's maintenance. It's constant awareness. That morning, I felt defeated because I realized something uncomfortable. Sometimes we sabotage our own progress out of fear. Fear that things won't be done right. Fear that our child might struggle. Fear that chaos will return. In trying to prevent failure, I quietly reclaimed control. And control, in marriage, can look like competence, but feel like loneliness. At work, I was thriving. Building credibility. Speaking more confidently in meetings. Navigating professional life in the United States as an immigrant woman had strengthened me. At home, I was shrinking into old patterns. The breaking point came over something small, a forgotten school library book. It triggered a disproportionate argument. Not about the book, but about trust. He said, "You don't let me fully own anything." I said, "Because when I do, things fall through." We were both partially right. And that's what made it painful. Marriage challenges after immigration are layered. You're adjusting to a new country, new expectations, new social norms. In America, fathers are often expected to be highly involved, emotionally and practically. That cultural expectation influenced him. But my upbringing influenced me. I was raised to anticipate needs before anyone else did. To prevent mistakes before they happened. to hold everything together quietly. Letting go felt unnatural. But equality requires release. That afternoon, instead of continuing the argument, I asked myself a harder question. If I want shared responsibility, am I truly allowing shared authority? Authority means accepting that things may be done differently. Not worse. Just differently. In many American families I observed, fathers pack lunches differently. They dress kids differently. They solve emotional meltdowns differently. Yet the children are loved. The outcomes are fine. I realized my definition of done correctly was too narrow. So we reset again. This time, instead of dividing responsibilities only, we also divided decision-making power. If he handled school communication, he chose how to manage deadlines. If I handled finances, I chose the budgeting system. No corrections unless safety was involved. The first real test came during parent-teacher conference week. Normally, I would prepare questions, review academic reports, and mentally rehearse concerns. This time, he scheduled the meeting and led the conversation. I stayed quiet unless asked. It was uncomfortable. But something surprising happened. He asked questions I wouldn't have thought of. He noticed social dynamics in the classroom that I overlooked. He followed up with the teacher directly without looping me in for approval. Driving home, I felt something new, not anxiety. Relief. That was the moment I understood something critical about parenting partnership in America. Equality isn't just about workload. It's about trust. Trust that your partner is capable. Trust that imperfection won't destroy your family. Trust that love covers minor mistakes. For immigrant couples especially, control can feel like survival. When you're building stability in a new country, you want everything predictable. But marriage cannot thrive on hyper-control. It thrives on shared growth. There was still tension. Letting go doesn't erase emotional reflexes overnight. Some days, I had to physically stop myself from intervening. But slowly, our home felt less heavy. He became more proactive because he felt fully responsible. I became calmer because I wasn't carrying invisible weight alone. Parenting equality in America, for us, evolved from a fairness issue into a personal transformation journey. I had to confront my own fear of being unnecessary. That realization was uncomfortable. When you've built identity around being the reliable one, the organizer, the emotional anchor, sharing that role can feel like losing importance. But in reality, I gained something better, partnership without exhaustion. One evening, months after that parking lot breakdown, I watched him help our child with a school project. They laughed over mistakes. They improvised creatively. It wasn't the way I would have done it. It was better in its own way. And I felt proud, not just of him, but of us. If you're watching this and feeling stuck in your marriage or parenting dynamic, especially while living and working in the United States, consider this. Progress doesn't disappear because you struggle again. Growth includes regression. The question is not whether you fall back into old habits. The question is whether you notice and choose differently. That morning in the parked car, I almost gave up on the effort. I almost convinced myself that this is just how it is. But equality isn't a cultural trend. It's a relationship choice. And choosing it repeatedly, even when it's inconvenient, has reshaped our marriage more than any grand romantic gesture ever could. We are still learning. Still adjusting. Still negotiating. But today, when challenges arise, we don't argue about help. We revisit ownership. We revisit trust. We revisit balance. Living the immigrant life in America is already demanding. Career pressure, financial goals, raising children between cultures, it's a lot. Your marriage shouldn't feel like another battlefield. It should feel like a shared foundation. The day I almost gave up became the day I understood something vital. Equality requires courage from both partners. Courage to release control. Courage to accept imperfection. Courage to rebuild again and again. And that courage has made our family stronger than control ever did. Raising a child between two cultures and redefining strength. There was a question our child asked one evening that stopped me mid-sentence. Why does Dad cook now? It wasn't judgmental. It was curious. But behind that simple question was something deeper, identity. Living and working in the United States as immigrants means raising a child between two value systems. At home, echoes of our traditional upbringing still exist. Outside, American culture presents a different model of family dynamics, parenting equality, and shared responsibility. That night, I realized something powerful. Our child was watching everything. Not just who cooks. Not just who cleans. But who leads. Who apologizes. Who carries stress? Who rests? Parenting equality in America isn't only about fairness between husband and wife. It's about modeling a new definition of strength for the next generation. Earlier in our marriage, strength looked like endurance. I carried more because I could. I stayed silent because I was capable. I solved problems alone because it was efficient. But endurance without partnership breeds quiet resentment. In many American parenting conversations, at school events, workplace discussions, even community groups, the emphasis is clear. Children learn gender roles by observing daily life. And that reality forced us to look deeper. What were we teaching without realizing it? If our child sees mom doing everything and dad helping, what message is internalized? If our child sees tension when responsibilities are discussed, what becomes normal? The shift from help to shared responsibility was already reshaping our marriage. Now, it began shaping our parenting philosophy. We started being intentional, not performative, not exaggerated, but consistent. When dinner was cooked, we rotated naturally. When school forms needed signing, whoever owned that domain handled it. When one of us was overwhelmed from work, the other stepped in without negotiation. One weekend, we faced a test of this new balance. I had an important presentation at work. He had a deadline too. In the past, I would have quietly adjusted my schedule, assuming my career flexibility mattered less. This time, we approached it differently. We sat down and mapped out the week like business partners planning a project. Who handles school drop-off? Who manages after-school pickup? Who prepares meals? It felt strategic, but respectful. And for the first time, our child saw both parents preparing seriously for professional responsibilities. After my presentation, I came home to a clean kitchen and homework completed. Not perfectly organized. Not identical to how I would have done it. But done. Our child ran up and said, "Dad said your meeting was important." That sentence hit me harder than any promotion ever did. Because this wasn't about chores. It was about narrative. In the American cultural environment, children are often encouraged to see both parents as equal authority figures. Equal contributors. Equal emotional anchors. Growing up, I didn't see that model often. Love existed, but roles were fixed. Now, in our immigrant family life in America, we had the opportunity to redefine that pattern. There was still friction. Some relatives questioned our approach subtly. Comments like, "He cooks now?" or "You let him handle school meetings?" Cultural expectations don't disappear just because you cross an ocean. But we had learned something essential through our marriage challenges. External opinions cannot dictate internal balance. One afternoon, during a parent discussion group at school, a mother shared how her daughter believed boys don't cry because she rarely saw her father express emotion. That conversation stayed with me. Strength is not silent sacrifice. Strength is emotional availability. At home, we began modeling that too. When he felt overwhelmed, he said it openly. When I felt anxious about work, I admitted it. Our child started expressing feelings more clearly, mirroring what was normalized. Parenting equality in America, I realized, extends beyond tasks. It extends into emotional labor. Who comforts after a nightmare? Who attends school performances? Who explains difficult world events? We stopped assigning these roles unconsciously. We shared them intentionally. There was a moment during a family walk that confirmed the shift. Our child fell and scraped a knee. Instinctively, both of us moved at the same time. He picked up gently. I cleaned the wound. No hierarchy. No silent expectation that one parent handles care. Just teamwork. Later that night, I reflected on how far we had come. Marriage growth after immigration isn't linear. It's shaped by stress, ambition, fatigue, and adaptation. But when both partners commit to evolving, the household atmosphere changes. The air feels lighter. Arguments resolve faster. Respect deepens. And children notice. If you're building a life in the United States while navigating traditional roots, here's something I learned the hard way. Your child will inherit not just your culture, but your conflict patterns. They will replicate what feels normal. By choosing shared responsibility, we weren't just protecting our marriage. We were rewriting a blueprint. One evening, while preparing dinner together, our child casually said, "In our family, everyone does everything." That simple sentence felt like quiet victory. No speeches. No lectures. Just lived example. The American dream often focuses on career success and financial stability. But in immigrant households, there's another dream quietly unfolding, the dream of raising children who see equality as ordinary. Who don't associate strength with silence. Who don't measure love by exhaustion. Parenting equality in America isn't a trend for us. It's a foundation we're actively building. We are still imperfect. Still adjusting. Still learning when to step back and when to step forward. But today, when I look at our family dynamic, I don't see imbalance. I see evolution. And maybe that's the real legacy of this journey. Not that we became perfectly equal overnight, but that we chose, repeatedly, to grow. Because the way we parent today becomes the belief system our child carries tomorrow. And that responsibility, shared fully, is the greatest gift we can offer. What parenting equality in America ultimately taught me about love. If someone had told me years ago that the biggest transformation in my immigrant journey to the United States would not be my career, my visa status, or even my financial stability, but my definition of partnership, I would not have believed them. Yet here we are. Looking back on our story of parenting equality in America, I no longer see it as a debate about chores, schedules, or fairness. I see it as a mirror. A mirror that forced both of us to confront who we were becoming, and what kind of marriage we wanted to model for our child. When we first arrived in the United States, survival was the priority. Adjust to the work culture. Improve our English communication. Understand healthcare, taxes, school systems. Every day felt like a test. In that survival mode, traditional roles quietly felt easier. Familiar patterns require less negotiation. When you're overwhelmed, you lean toward what you know. But survival is not the same as thriving. As our life stabilized, jobs more secure, routines more predictable, the cracks in our dynamic became clearer. I was functioning efficiently, but not peacefully. He was contributing, but not fully owning. And love, when stretched under invisible imbalance, begins to feel transactional. One of the most important lessons parenting equality in America taught me is this: resentment grows in silence, but respect grows in transparency. We stopped pretending everything was fine. We talked about emotional fatigue. We discussed mental load openly. We admitted when we felt unseen. Those conversations were not comfortable. Sometimes they felt like we were dismantling our own foundation. But in truth, we were rebuilding it stronger. There was a turning point that felt symbolic. We were cleaning the house together one Sunday evening. Music playing softly. Our child doing homework at the table. No tension. No scoreboard in my head. No internal calculation of who did more. Just presence. In that ordinary moment, I realized something profound: equality feels calm. It doesn't shout. It doesn't perform. It doesn't need applause. It simply removes friction. Marriage challenges, especially in immigrant families building a life in America, often center around money and time. But underneath those conflicts is usually something deeper: recognition. Do you see me? Do you value my effort? Do you respect my work inside and outside this home? Parenting partnership forced us to answer those questions with action, not words. There was still imperfection. We still disagreed. We still faced stressful weeks where work deadlines clashed with school responsibilities. But the tone changed. Instead of accusing, we recalibrated. Instead of assuming, we clarified. Instead of silently absorbing pressure, we redistributed it. That shift protected our emotional connection. I used to believe that love meant sacrifice without complaint. That a strong woman carries weight quietly. That a good husband provides financially and helps at home. Living in the United States exposed me to different models of marriage, ones where vulnerability was normalized, where fathers attended school meetings confidently, where mothers prioritized careers unapologetically. At first, I resisted parts of it. It felt foreign. Now, I see it as expansion. Parenting equality in America didn't erase my cultural roots. It refined them. It challenged outdated assumptions while preserving values like commitment, loyalty, and family unity. One evening, after putting our child to bed, we sat on the couch in comfortable silence. He said, "I feel more connected to you now than when we first moved here." I knew exactly what he meant. Connection grows when pressure is shared. Love deepens when effort is mutual. Respect multiplies when responsibility is balanced. The most unexpected outcome of this journey was personal growth. I became more aware of my own patterns, my need for control, my fear of imperfection, my tendency to overfunction. He became more aware of emotional labor, of initiative, of leadership inside the home. We both evolved. And our child is growing up watching that evolution in real time. In many conversations about modern parenting in America, the focus is on children's development. But I've learned something equally important: parenting transforms the parents. If you're watching this and feeling discouraged in your marriage, especially while navigating immigrant life in the United States, I want to share something honest. Equality is not automatic here. It's intentional. It requires humility from both partners. It requires uncomfortable conversations. It requires letting go of pride. But the reward is peace. Not perfect peace. Not effortless harmony. Sustainable peace. Today, when someone asks me whether helping is enough in a marriage, I smile. Helping implies hierarchy. Sharing implies unity. Our journey taught me that unity is stronger. We still divide responsibilities. We still adjust based on workload and life seasons. But the mindset is different. Neither of us is the assistant. Neither of us is the supervisor. We are co-builders. And in this country where opportunity is vast but pressure is constant, having a co-builder makes all the difference. The American dream is often described as independence. But in marriage, the real dream is interdependence. Choosing each other daily. Carrying weight together. Growing without competition. Parenting equality in America did not weaken our marriage. It strengthened it. It did not dilute our cultural identity. It expanded it. It did not create distance. It created respect. As this chapter of our story closes, one truth stands above the rest. Love is lighter when responsibility is shared. If you are tired, if you feel unseen, if you're wondering whether your marriage can evolve, it can. Not through grand gestures, but through small, consistent shifts in ownership, trust, and courage. This journey continues for us. Growth never truly ends. But today, our home feels less like a place of negotiation, and more like a place of partnership. And that, more than any professional milestone or immigration achievement, is the success I value most. If there's one truth this entire journey of parenting equality in America has taught me, it's this. Love doesn't collapse in one dramatic moment. It slowly fades when responsibility is unbalanced. We moved to the United States chasing opportunity, stability, and growth. What we didn't expect was that the biggest transformation wouldn't happen in our careers, it would happen inside our marriage. The real question was never who helps more. It was always, are we truly building this life together? Immigrant life in America tests everything: identity, patience, pride, endurance. When you add marriage, parenting, cultural differences, and professional ambition into that mix, the pressure multiplies. But pressure can either divide you or refine you. Our story is not about perfection. It's about evolution. We learned that shared responsibility protects respect. That emotional transparency prevents resentment. That equality is not a Western trend, it's a daily decision. And here's what still amazes me. The moment we stopped competing silently and started partnering intentionally, everything changed. Our conversations softened. Our child felt the difference. Our home felt lighter. Parenting partnership in America is not about splitting chores 50-50ths. It's about carrying weight 100 out of 100. If you're watching this while feeling exhausted in your marriage. If you're navigating immigrant life in the United States while trying to hold everything together. If you're quietly wondering whether help is enough. Stay with this channel. Because this is not just my story. In the next videos, I'll share the hidden emotional cost of overfunctioning in marriage. How cultural expectations silently shape parenting roles. Practical systems we use to rebalance our household. The mindset shift that rebuilt intimacy after resentment. And the one mistake immigrant couples often make without realizing it. This journey of modern marriage, parenting equality, and building a life in America is still unfolding. And if something in this story resonated with you, even slightly, then you're not here by accident. You're here because you're searching for growth. For clarity. For partnership that feels strong, not exhausting. So if you want real stories about marriage growth in America, honest conversations about parenting equality, and practical lessons from immigrant life in the US, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications. Comment below, help or share? I read every comment, and your story might shape the next video. Because the truth is, none of us are alone in this. We're all learning how to love better. How to lead better. How to build families that feel safe and equal. And sometimes, the smallest shift in responsibility can completely transform a relationship. This is just the beginning. See you in the next story.